Hello, welcome to the latest GSO awardee presentation from the McMaster Health Forum at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I will provide a brief summary of the McMaster Health Forum and the Global Skills Opportunity Program, then I'm going to turn things over to a group of presenters who all traveled together to work with the Pan-African Collective for Evidence in South Africa. The McMaster Health Forum aims to be the leading hub for improving health outcomes through collective problem solving. We harness information, convene stakeholders, and prepare action-oriented leaders to act as an agent of change by empowering stakeholders. The Global Skills Opportunity Student Mobility Projects aim to empower Canadian students, especially underrepresented students, to take advantage of international learning experiences and to develop skills such as problem solving, adaptability, resilience, and intercultural competency. While open to all undergraduate students, the national program targets groups for whom international experiences have traditionally been less accessible, specifically Indigenous students, students from low-income backgrounds, and those with disabilities. It also aims to diversify the destination countries where Canadian students pursue international learning. The McMaster Health Forum is proud to have been selected to host a Global Skills Opportunity Student Mobility Project from October 2021 to March 2025. This project will enable emerging leaders with McMaster University's undergraduate community to build knowledge and skills to support health and social system strengthening internationally. We will leverage McMaster Health Forum's programs to support skills development in policy, political, and systems analysis, evidence synthesis, and stakeholder engagement, while building on our experience with student mentorship, leadership development, and facilitating international exchange. Over the first 2 years of the program, the McMaster Health Forum worked with 9 GSO awardees who engaged with various international partners in India, South Africa, and Trinidad and Tobago. In the second half of the program, the forum will work with 9 GSO awardees who will engage with international partners in Australia, India, Kosovo, and South Africa. One of our presenters is Annie, who at the time of the GSO internship was an undergraduate student in the Bachelor of Health Sciences program at McMaster University. Annie has various scholarly interests, including public health, narrative medicine, and creative arts therapy. Through GSO, Annie hoped to learn more about evidence synthesis in the context of South African health systems. Another one of our presenters is Maureen, who at the time of her GSO award was an undergraduate student in the Honors Life Sciences program at McMaster University with a minor in community engagement. Maureen's research interests include addressing and improving health outcomes for marginalized populations and working towards system-level change. Through GSO, Maureen aimed to develop her understanding of health systems and policymaking in South Africa, working to strengthen her cultural competency skills and develop global connections. Another one of today's presenters is Nujud, who at the time of her GSO internship was an undergraduate student in the Bachelor of Health Sciences program at McMaster University. Nujud's scholarly interest is centered around social equity research, which is reflected in her role as a research assistant for a community-engaged project that strives to enhance the health and well-being of immigrants and refugees in Canada. As a GSO awardee, Nujud hoped to learn about South Africa's health and social systems, enhance her cultural competency, and foster meaningful connections. Another of today's presenters is Stella, who at the time of the GSO award was an undergraduate student in the Bachelor of Health Sciences program at McMaster University. Stella is actively working to enhance her understanding of large-scale global health and health systems matters. Through her GSO internship, Stella intended to gain understanding of evidence synthesis within the context of South African health systems and policy while gaining insight on South African culture. Annie, Maureen, Nujud, and Stella, over to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Nujud and I am joined by Maureen, Annie, and Stella to talk to you about our experience in South Africa as part of the Global Skills Opportunity Program. So we're going to introduce you to the organization that we did our internship at, which is the Pan-African Collective for Evidence, and talk about some of the great work that they do. We're also going to get into the specifics of the project that we worked on and what our roles were. As well as ending the presentation with telling you about what we did in Johannesburg and Cape Town. So to start off, our journey was quite a long one because there's no direct flights from Toronto to South Africa. So first we took a 7-hour flight from the Toronto Pearson Airport to the Heathrow Airport in London, UK. And we had an 11-hour layover there, and we were able to take advantage of it by actually entering London and doing some sightseeing there. And then we continued our journey from the Heathrow Airport to the OR Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg, which was an 11-hour flight. So all in all, this was approximately a 29-hour journey to get to South Africa. So we had a couple of different destinations within South Africa, the first of which was Johannesburg, and this is where the team where we were doing our internship at were located. But because they don't have a designated office space and the work is largely virtual, we were also lucky enough to be able to visit some other cities as well. So we went to Mpumalanga, where we stayed at the Kruger National Park Safari for 2 nights. And then we finished off our trip with 16 nights in Cape Town. And 2 of us also went to Stellenbosch for 2 nights as well. And we're going to get into the specifics at the end of the presentation of what we did in each of these places, but I just wanted to set some spatial context. While we were in South Africa, we had a couple of different personal and learning objectives. The first was to strengthen our cultural competency by really delving into South Africa's diverse cultural, social, and historical landscapes. We were also excited to enhance our research skills, specifically in data extraction, coding, and analysis, and just to learn about the research methodologies at PACE. And we also were interested in collaborating with researchers and policymakers in South Africa to develop evidence-informed policy recommendations. So overall, just really excited to learn, both in terms of research, but also on a cultural basis as well. As I mentioned earlier, we did our internship with the Pan-African Collective for Evidence, and this is a non-governmental organization that leverages evidence-informed policymaking with the goal of reducing poverty and inequalities, not just in South Africa, but across the African continent. And in order to support researchers and stakeholders in gathering research that is of high quality and is robust, they maintain a database of evidence capacity resources, and they've also conducted over 80 policy-relevant evidence synthesis products. So just to give you a little bit more information about what PACE does, they ultimately strive to improve evidence-informed policymaking through several different avenues. The first is through mentorship. So they empower emerging leaders and provide very tailored support to individuals and organizations regarding the use of evidence and research methodologies. They also establish communities of practice, and what that means is they bring very diverse groups together to collaborate, share insights, and address any pressing issues across Africa. And they engage both stakeholders, but also citizens like youth as well in these discussions. They also offer training courses to equip decision makers and aspiring leaders with skills to effectively use evidence in policymaking. And lastly, they have advisory services for the use of evidence to ensure that policies are informed by high-quality, context-specific data and research. While we were working with PACE, one of their primary objectives was to gather evidence that can inform policy on addressing the pressing rates of gender-based violence and femicide in the country. And this is a crisis that is really impacting the safety, security, and well-being of survivors, children, their families, and communities, as well as society as a whole in South Africa. So it was really important to them that they address it. And so they introduced us to the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Framework, which was developed in collaboration between civil society as well as the government to ensure that there was a very coordinated national response to this crisis. And the ultimate goal was to comprehensively and strategically respond to gender-based violence and femicide with a specific focus on violence against all women and children. They have a multi-pillar framework to address the gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa. Pillar 1 focuses on bold leadership, accountability, and multi-sectoral collaboration to really ensure effective coordination and governance in general. Pillar 2 emphasizes prevention through evidence-based programs, as well as changing harmful social norms and fostering a very caring and violence-free community. Pillar 3 aims to strengthen the justice system, so really just ensuring accessible and gender-sensitive criminal justice for survivors. Pillar 4 prioritizes victim-centered care, support, and healing to eliminate secondary victimization and overall just provide a holistic recovery service. And additional pillars target economic empowerment of equity-deserving groups and emphasize research-driven policy and data management to address the systemic gender-based violence and femicide challenges effectively. And this was ultimately the main driving framework of the project that PACE was working on, which we got to help them out with, and Maureen's going to walk you through that now.
Given the rates of gender-based violence in South Africa, our project played an important role in both advancing and contributing to government priorities. Despite efforts, it is still a prevalent issue within the country, with many layers that need to be addressed at multiple levels, which highlights the importance of our work in targeting priority areas. As mentioned, we use the NSP guidelines to guide our work. We'll be covering a summary of the project in the next slide, but the NSP guidelines were important to ensure that we were retrieving information that was in line with government priorities, as it would be used to develop interventions for each of the 6 pillars. Current interventions that have been developed include care center for victims and additional funding allocated to organizations that carry out vital work within communities addressing gender-based violence. For our project, we were tasked to work on data extraction on EPI, which is the software that PACE uses. Through our work, we would be contributing to the creation of an artificial intelligence tool, which would serve as a hub for resources and support for GBV. As seen in the slide prior, it is important that throughout our extraction, we were identifying key points that align with the NSP pillars. At first, this was a bit difficult as this was the first time that we were seeing the pillars and the first time using a brand new software. But over time, we were able to better assess and categorize the studies, identifying which pillar they were most relevant to. Most of the work that we carried out was remote. Each week, we had team meetings where we went over the extraction that we were doing and troubleshooted together as a team if anyone ran into issues. It was a good opportunity to work and learn from each other about best practices, given that we were each extracting from different articles which addressed different pillars and also using a new software. One of the biggest reflections and takeaways that we took away while working on the project was the importance of communication throughout the team. Given that we were new members working on the project, leaning on more experienced members was helpful to make sure that we were on the right track and making sure that we were doing our tasks correctly. Our work gave us the opportunity to appreciate and to be able to understand how evidence research can impact policy and lead to combating crucial issues. The work that we were doing was in line with the National Strategic Plan, which, when looking in the big picture, really highlighted the importance of our project. Additionally, we were carrying our research primarily for the government, which was an opportunity to see how it differed from academic research, which we were most used to doing. Comparing and contrasting, it was interesting to see the issues of gender-based violence in South Africa compared to Canada. While there are many similarities in terms of historical drivers, certain communities are more disproportionately at risk for gender-based violence in Canada. In a way, it underscores the nuances that make up a complex issue and the considerations and modifications that we need to take when developing interventions for each country.
Hi everyone, this is Annie, and I'll be walking you through some of the things that we did in Johannesburg, South Africa. So starting off with accommodation and logistics, we stayed at an Airbnb in Sandton, Johannesburg, and Sandton is basically a neighborhood in Johannesburg and is also known as Africa's richest mile. We mainly used Uber for travel to and from the office and to other locations, and we got most of our groceries at Woolworths, which is one of the main grocery chains in South Africa. One of the very first activities we did in South Africa was the Red Bus Tour. So this was a hop-on, hop-off tour, meaning that we were able to kind of hop off the bus and explore certain locations. Some notable destinations included the Mandela House and the Apartheid Museum, and we took the opportunity to hop off at the Apartheid Museum. When we visited the Apartheid Museum, it was a very beautiful and educational experience about the apartheid. So the apartheid is basically a system of racial segregation that was prevalent in South Africa from 1948 to 1984. Nelson Mandela, which is a person that you may have heard of, was actually a key political figure in ending the apartheid regime. However, disparities from the apartheid still affect South Africa to this day. So it was really interesting to kind of learn about apartheid in a museum, but it was also interesting to kind of connect that back to some of the real things that we experienced in South Africa, which I will be covering very soon. The PACE office was located in downtown Johannesburg in a building called Workshop 17. And in the office, we met with Andeli, who was a part of PACE, and Karen Van Ziel, who is the Assistant Director of the Department of Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation in South Africa's national government. So this was a really cool day because we got to meet with a lot of PACE experts and government stakeholders. And we got to hear a bit about, gender-based violence from a policy perspective, and also be introduced to kind of the work that we would be doing in the following weeks. Another memorable experience we had in Johannesburg was visiting Soweto and the Soweto Towers. So on this day, Andali offered to guide us throughout Soweto, and we learned that Soweto is a township where Nelson Mandela once lived. So township is a term for historically underdeveloped, racially segregated urban settlements due to the apartheid regime. And we noticed that residents were majority Black, and there were also noticeable disparities compared to our Airbnb in Sandton. We also realized that it was a tourism destination, so there were lots of people in stalls selling souvenirs, as you can see pictured on the left there. And one of the things that we did on this day was go up the Soweto Towers. So again, on the image on the right, you can see that we went up this kind of red cage that took us up the towers. And this was a bit scary for me. As you can see in the photo, I'm a bit scared of heights. So one of the things that Soweto Towers actually offers is bungee jumping. However, it wasn't available that day, but I'm sure that if it was, that one of us would have totally taken that chance to do that. And finally, perhaps one of the most memorable experiences that we had was the Kruger National Park Safari. So this technically wasn't in Johannesburg, but it was during that kind of 2-week block that we had. So this was a 3-day safari experience at the Kruger National Park, and we went on 3 game rides total. On these rides, we saw lots of elephants, zebra, impala, wildebeest, and a lion. And it was just absolutely surreal being up close and personal with these animals, and definitely something that you should try if you ever go to South Africa.
Hi, my name's Stella, and I'll be talking about the Cape Town section of our trip. So Cape Town was the latter 2 weeks of our stay, and we coordinated this with PACE before we went on a trip, and they were very accommodating, which was very exciting for us because Cape Town was an awesome experience. In Cape Town, Nujud and I stayed in a 2-bedroom Airbnb in Greenpoint, which was near V&A waterfront. Annie and Maureen were just a few blocks away from us in an apartment as well. I felt very safe here. The front door was actually unlocked by Face ID, and there was always a security guard at the front desk, so it felt very, very safe. We used Uber to get around, no taxis, as taxis can be dangerous in South Africa. And for food, we used Woolworths, the grocery store, and Uber Eats. Our first adventure was the Red Bus Tour on one of the first days. We got off at the Botanical Gardens this time, and we got to see an awesome view of Table Mountain and some really cool plants. And then we got off at the World of Birds, where there was monkeys here. So the World of Birds is like a sanctuary for birds and other animals. Here's in the monkey enclosure is what the picture is. And the guide will put food on your laps and the monkeys will jump around everybody, and it was really fun. Our next adventure was Table Mountain. We took the gondola up Table Mountain and we explored around at the top. We went at just the right time and we got to see the sunset, which was so beautiful. Most of the time we were just looking out at the views, but we also did have dinner at the restaurant at the top of the mountain, which was really beautiful. Next we went to Lion's Head, which was one of my absolute favorite days of the whole trip. We got to hike up the mountain. And there was ladders, chains, and scrambling, which you can see at the bottom here. The bottom left is chains, and next to it is the ladder. So you had to climb up these ladders, of course, and the chains were kind of like rock climbing, and then scrambling as well is just like on a steeper incline and kind of like a rocky path, like not so easy. So that was really kind of engaging and lots of fun, although the safety standards are a little different than in Canada. In Canada, I would think that they would have you strapped in or some sort of excess safety with this, but here they had some fenced areas and just recommended you go with a guide, which we did. But just interesting to compare the differences here. Our next day was at Bo-Kaap. So this is a very colorful neighborhood that we explored around. We went to an art gallery, a store filled with handmade goods, and a restaurant for lunch. So the history with Bo-Kaap is that it used to be rented to slaves by Dutch colonists during the apartheid regime, and they only allowed the houses to be painted white. So once the people were able to own the houses, they painted them very colorful, and it's now a symbol of freedom, which is really nice. Next we went on the Cape of Good Hope tour, which is a guided tour. We stopped at Hout Bay, where we got to see this little seal do a show for us on the right side. And we went to Seal Island, just a 10-minute boat ride away from Hout Bay, next to Boulder Beach, where we got to see penguins on the beach. And then we finally ended the day at the Cape of Good Hope, which is the most southwestern point of the African continent. Annie and I took a weekend trip to Stellenbosch, which is a region famous for wine about an hour north of Cape Town. It was absolutely serene. We visited 6 different wine estates, 3 on day 1, 3 on day 2. The second day we used the Franschhoek wine tram, and the first day we just got around with Uber, but the wine tram can be seen on the top right pictures. It was so beautiful. Just a very, very serene experience. We also got, our favorite was at the Lairgraf Estate, which can be seen with the food platter up here. I would recommend to anybody. Amazing. Right before we left, we went to the Gold Restaurant, which is a traditional South African restaurant where we ate South African food and got to see performers doing South African dance and playing South African music. They face painted our faces during the meals. And at the end, we even got to go on the stage and do a dance with some of the dancers. So very engaging, very exciting, and delicious food. We did notice some clear disparities that are some lasting effects of the apartheid regime. So that was between 1948 to 1994, so kind of recently. And during this time, white communities were given access to well-developed areas where Black communities were forced to live in under-resourced, less developed regions. This is obviously still relevant today, as we noticed a predominantly Black community living in some of the informal settlements, as you can see in the top picture, and a predominantly white community living in nicer areas like the Clifton Beaches, bottom picture. Of course, we learned so much during our stay in South Africa and during our work with PACE. So we learned a lot of teamwork. We lived and worked together. We had to trust one another with, those travel, safety, cultural, things like that. And our coworkers at PACE, of course, as well, with our work with them. We also got to attend a social with PACE, and we learned that they're a very tight-knit group, which was really cool to see as a co-worker environment, because I think it's a lot more close than we are here in Canada. So really interesting to interact with them and build those relationships as well. We also, of course, gained a lot of research capabilities while we were there. So we learned how to do data extraction, learned how to critically analyze literature, and how to construct an evidence map and how that all works.
Another key takeaway from this trip was an improvement in research capabilities. So many of us learned how to do a data extraction for the first time, and also how to critically analyze literature, how to make an evidence map, and how an evidence map works. And finally, for global skill development, we truly immersed ourselves in South African culture and also learned how to interact with those from another culture on this trip. And finally, we just want to give a big thank you to James, PACE, and the GSO program for this incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Thank you again. We've learned so much, and we are so grateful to have had this experience.
We hope that you enjoyed our latest GSO awardee webinar. If you're interested in the Master Health Forum and our various programs, there are links on the screen now. You can also follow us on social media and our website at mcmasterforum.org.